What's going on, Tamers? East here. Last year in Asia, the Talmon Loop deck became a really popular choice among players for its ability to put down multiple Digimon on the board and put your opponent under severe DP minuses on their entire field in the course of a single turn. It was so interesting that we made a video on the channel talking about it, so if you want to see another flavor of the deck we're going to talk about today, definitely check that out after this video. To summarize a few key points, the deck was basically all gas with Michael Bay levels of cinematic explosiveness, with the small downside of some potential consistency issues. And as a result, we saw players move away from this min-max version of the deck back toward a more normal Sakuyamon ratio list. And then later, the BT20 over the X set release with some fantastic cards for the yellow card pool in general, including things like the Chaosmon Valder arm, which made Sakuyamon even scarier. In fact, it was so powerful that Singapore's Kurova ended up taking third place with it at Worlds thanks to some great deck building and even better piloting. And so in today's video, let's take a look at the deck, what makes it so powerful, some of its plays, and some ways that you might be able to fight against it in your own games. Let's dive in. So let's first talk about what makes Sakuyamon so strong. What really sets this deck apart from any other deck in the game is its ability to use cheap option cards for great effect. Things like its own in-archetype Digivolution plugin S for free evolves and card draw. You've also got some DP minus with the pause plugin P here. And the cool thing about this deck is now you can actually go outside of just these archetypal cards in some of the more generic really good option cards like the physical training. You've also got things like the yellow scramble and also yellow memory boost. Utilizing cards like this, you can very quickly get to your level 6 Digimon and even further beyond. One of the hard parts about building this deck is that you do run so many option cards that space is really tight. Some of your Digimon ratios might be a little bit wonky, however, there is admittedly an absurd amount of card draw in this deck. When you take a look at your Search Your Renomons, not only in the EX2 version, but also with the BT17, you've also got Digimon in the deck themselves, like the Sakuyamon who just draws you 2 on Evolve. You've got the plugins like the Digivolution plugin S we talked about before, and also some of the useful options and things like the physical training, the memory boost, as well as even the new Rika Tamer. And so as long as you can kind of get the ball rolling, once you find 1 or 2 of these pieces, everything else just tends to fall in place. And so when you're able to actually get to those level 6s and level 7s, the upper end of the deck does feature a really flexible cast of cards and effects that pretty much lets you deal with any situation in the game. You've got things like the BT17 Sakuyamon, who gives you barrier and can prevent itself from being bounced. You've got the BT19 Sakuyamon, who gives you a blocker token at 6k. Offensively, you've also got the Sakuyamon X Antibody, who gives you a token with Rush, that means you can attack immediately, and it's 9k. And the level 7s really do provide for most situations you'll encounter, which are Shine Greymon Ruin mode. If an opponent's trying to keep something in the back, you can put the blanket minus 5k or minus 10k down so that they can't promote the following turn, and you essentially get a free turn after that. Or you've got offensively and defensively the Chaosmon Valder arm, who's going to suspend Digimon and Tamers. He's going to get memory back. He's got security attack +1 for double swings, and he's also got the ability to stop Digimon and Tamer on play effects for a turn. Honestly, just between the level 7s, you can handle most situations the game can throw at you right now. So now that we have a basic idea of what the deck is trying to do, let's take a look at a couple of example turns to see how we can actually do it. Let's imagine we're going first here, and we just hatch our Viximon for the turn. And we can do a really basic turn 1, like evolving into the Renomon here. Don't forget to draw, and then just playing down something like a 2-cost physical training. So put our opponent at 2, and let's imagine in some simple world they just play down a level 3 Digimon for 3 costs and just pass us back over 1. Even with 1 memory, we can do quite a bit here. So first off, we can promote the Renomon here onto the board, and then we can spin this physical training from last turn in order to evolve for cost -2, basically 0. Into our Cubimon, who lets us play down a Rika Tamer for free. Don't forget to draw from the evolve, and then the Rika Tamer also lets us search. And now with only 1 memory, we can't do a whole lot, but we can evolve 1 more time into the level 5 Talmon, which will cost us 3. And this on evolve lets us play an option at cost -2, so we can just play the Digivolution plugin S. This will let us draw, and then we can evolve 1 more time, essentially for 0 here, into our level 6 Sakuyamon. With this, the Sakuyamon also lets us play an option, so we might opt to do something like, I don't know, a physical training, or maybe you've got a memory boost somewhere. You can do like a memory boost instead. Your choice, honestly. It's 0 cost, so you might as well. And now, because we played an option, we get, because of the Sakuyamon's effect, we can play down a blocker 6000 token, and now we need to go back and process some of the effects from before. So for example, we've got the Rika Tamer, who says that you can rest her and gain a memory. And you've got the Renomon sources that says whenever you play a 2-cost or higher option, you can gain a memory. So now we're at 0, and we get to keep our turn. From this point here, I think it's really important to consider what the game state looks like in order to make this final move to actually end your turn. For example, if your opponent has something that looks a little bit scary in raising, and they have nothing on the board, you might opt to go into like just a raw Shine Greymon Ruin mode for 5. That's an option, of course. If you have a Scramble and the Ruin mode, you can play the Scramble and then evolve into the Ruin mode for cost -1. That'll pass on over 4. And this way they can't promote and then do some crazy stuff and like wipe out your level 6. If there isn't a threat on the board, however, it might just be best to just pass over a little bit of memory, and then you can pick up where you left off the following turn. Something like a 2-cost physical training to end the turn, putting your opponent at 2, not giving them much to work with, it might be the answer. One thing that I do want you to keep in mind is that you typically want to keep at least one scramble, one yellow scramble in your hand for your offensive turn. So if you've only got one, maybe decide to hold on to it and just play down Ruin mode for 5 and just kind of give them the extra memory, assuming they can't do much with it. But yeah, for your offensive turns, you're going to want that one scramble card, just so I think it's really useful, and we'll talk about why in just a moment. But anyway, let's imagine that our opponent has actually passed us back over, I don't know, once again, and it's our turn. We were able to keep our blocker token and our level 6 on the board. We'll unsuspend our Rika Tamer here, and now with, again, just one memory, we can do quite a bit. In order to go offensive, I think you're always looking for that one memory scenario, because this is what allows you to evolve into your Sakuyamon X antibody. From here, she lets you play down a 9000 DP rush token, so this can attack immediately the turn it comes out. And whenever she attacks, you can play an option or like you would any of the other effects in this deck. So we can do something like attack with the Sakuyamon X antibody here. And this will let us play down the yellow scramble that I mentioned before. And we can evolve now into the Chaosmon Valder-Arm. So don't forget to draw for that. And the Chaosmon Valder-Arm is going to do a bunch of stuff. Keep in mind this was a -3 cost evolve, but it's 5 total, so we're actually going to spend 2. When he comes on the board, again, you're going to freeze Tamers, you're going to rest Tamers or Digimon. You're going to gain memory back for every level 6 you have in sources, so in this case it's 2. And because we played an option card, you can rest the Rika Tamer again, and that's going to be +1. The Renamon is going to give you +1, and you're also going to give something -2k, but that's not super important. And now, for the following turn, if your opponent were to get one, their Digimon or Tamers could not activate on play effects, locking a lot of decks out of the game. Let's come back to the actual attack that we're doing. The Sakuyamon X antibody says that we can play that option, and when we do, we unsuspend the Digimon. So that effect still, because the stack is still here, gets processed, and we get to unsuspend our Chaosmon Valder-Arm, and because he has Sec +1, that's 2 checks at 15k. Once we make those 2 checks, we're free to just attack once again with the Chaosmon Valder-Arm for 2 more checks. Now, if you're keeping count at home, that's 4 total so far, 4 security. And now we can just simply attack with our blocker token from last turn. That's 5 security. And you can close out the game on an opponent who hasn't recovered by just attacking with the rush token you played from the Sakuyamon X. I do want to give a bit of a heads up here. I am kind of painting some of these effects in broad strokes just to give you the basic idea, but there's a lot more that actually goes on into this, so I really do implore you to read the cards in the deck, because knowing more about what they actually do will help you in more niche situations. But yeah, that pretty much sums up like what the power turns for this deck look like. I mean, it really is incredible how much you can do with just the Chaosmon Valder-Arm and a couple of plug-in and yellow options in the game. What's really cool is that you can see what just doing these 3 turns here, you actually go through quite a bit of the deck with just the effects that you get. Lord Seiji, can you do me a favor? You're gonna hate me for this, I'm so sorry. Can you go and just do a quick count of all the cards we go through in the deck if we were to process all of the actual effects and the evolutions? Because the number is not minuscule at all. Feel free to freeze frame it here and let the good folks at home know how many cards we actually went through. Defensively, the deck also has a lot of great options and tools at its disposal. I know we mostly talked about the Chaosmon Valder-Arm before alongside the Shine Greymon Ruin mode, but outside of just these two, there's tons of other things like the Renamon who gives security attack minus for the turn whenever you play an option card. You've got the Renamon X who gives something -2k. You've also got the Cubimon who lets you give something -2k. This is a really interesting tech that we saw in Kurova's deck, which was the Nature Spirit Starmon from EX7 who gives -3k on play or on evolve. You've also got the level 5 Talmon Ace, who gives -4k whenever it attacks an inheritance, and you got the -6k from the BT17 Sakuyamon whenever she's evolved into, and then finally you've also got the pause plugin P option here who gives minus 6k and can prevent Digimon from using their own evolve effects for a turn. With all of this DP minus there isn't much in the game that can actually get out of range of you being able to kill it over a single turn. So now that we know how the deck works, let's take a look at some ways that you can fight against it in your own games. The first thing to keep in mind when you're fighting this deck is that sometimes it just bricks. That was one of Kurova's biggest worries when he was playing through the deck. He's like, I feel good as long as I can find a couple of pieces to get the game going. And so for this reason, if you're able to just go aggressive in some of your games really early, my recommendation here is just to do that, because giving them the time to find pieces is only to your detriment. It really is hard to floodgate this deck at all, just because they have so much DP minus from inheritance effects and other cards that usually those little floodgates get vaporized immediately. On top of that, decks that can get to Digimon with at least 6k DP are actually quite good here. When you take a look at things like red, blue, or purple hybrid, you have lots of options by hiding behind Tamers and then later evolving into Digimon as long as the Chaosmon Vaulter arm isn't up for the turn. And if you're not playing a hybrid deck, I mean, it might just be worth it to keep a level 4 or level 5 in Raising for a rainy day. You know, the early game, play a level 3 in Raising, play a level 3 on the board, and then focus on the level 3 on the board, and then when that gets wiped, you can just pull out of whatever you have in Raising to continue the battle. Honestly, keeping that level 5 in Raising really is probably one of the best security measures you can have against this deck. And then finally, I don't think that it's honestly too relevant unless the deck becomes like super prevalent throughout the game, but there are cards like the white option Emergency Program Shutdown, which do turn off options for a turn. And so while I think it's a really niche and specific counter, it may be worth considering this card in case, you know, the deck does get really popular. But honestly, just a little bit of preparedness against this deck does go a long way. So we can pretty much wrap this one up. I think that if you really do like Sakuyamon, this is a really great deck to play right now. Lots of flexibility in what you can run. There's lots of great options as far as the card pool for this deck is concerned. If you want to try something a little bit different than the regular Sakuyamon build, you want to try like a more min-max version for some truly incredible turns, definitely take a look at my Talmon loop video for more. And for those of you out there who can't fathom the idea of putting together a miserable pile of cards with your own brain cells, I unfortunately don't have a deck list for you, but I'll tell you who does. Kurova, the guy who actually won 3rd place. He posted a great tournament report talking about his build. He showed off what it was, some of his matches in Worlds, what made him actually decide to build the deck in the way that he did, and a bunch of other great information. So I definitely recommend you check out his note. I'll put a link to it in the description. Anyways, folks, I'm gonna go figure out what the fox says. I'm gonna get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Oh, I need to remember to talk about the all nasty.